No matter where you go on the internet to read your manhwas, you'll be faced with titles such as I reincarnated as a villainess, avoiding death as a villainess, I won't follow the path of a villainess, etc. But how did we get here? When did the transmigration Shojo trope of the villainess start? In today's video, we'll cover the birth and the rise of the transmigration trope and how being reborn as a villainess spawned from it. Transmigration is a genre in which the protagonist's soul is moved from their original body into one after death, with the protagonist being called the transmigrator. Usually, the new body their soul inhabits exists within a fantasy world. It could be a fictional place, such as a world from a book, or a video game that the protagonist read in their original life, or it could simply be a new dimension their soul has traveled to. Hence why transmigration is akin to the trope reincarnated into another world. The main difference between transmigration and isekai is that isekai does not mean the protagonist switches body, but there still is a physical movement of worlds. In that sense, transmigration is a subgenre of isekai. When a character moves worlds and retains their original body, this is dubbed the trapped in another world trope. This is not transmigration. Based on some definitions, transmigration must have a movement of a soul into a different body, but could technically take place in the same world, meaning that Freaky Friday is a transmigration movie. Another genre closely akin to isekai and transmigration is regression. Regression is when a character goes back in time, regressing to a younger version of themselves, keeping their memories from their last life intact. This is another very common trope found in shoujo manhwas today. Examples that come to mind are the tyrant wants to be good, I'm the queen in this life, and dear nemesis. I find that regression and transmigration in shoujo share similar story beats, having the same overarching vibe of a strong woman avoiding her downfall due to the information she has from her past life, whether it be because she regressed or because she read it in a book in her past life. Both include an OP main character with a mind of a more mature adult compared to their physical appearance. The appeal to the reader in this sense is the same. Transmigration originated in Chinese and Korean web novels, and the history of how and when the genre started is highly contested. I found so much debate over what is the first and when the genre even came about. My thought process about how to go about relying this information to you guys was to generalize the history to be isekai at large, then inserting the less disputed knowledge of transmigration that I found compelling. As like I've said before, I think it's a subgenre of isekai, so sharing a history was apparent. I will be tackling the history of isekai by splitting it up into a few periods. Classical isekai, going from a long ass time ago till the 1970s, pre-modern isekai from the 1970s till 1996, the genesis of modern isekai from 1996 to 2012, and modern isekai, which is 2012 till today. Classical isekai refers to the creation of general vibes, pre-modern being the creation of the isekai tropes, and genesis of modern isekai being the stories that are attributed to popularizing the genre, and modern being the current state of the genre we see today. In short, the idea of a character traveling into a new world has basically always existed. It can be argued that some mythos are the first isekais. Classics like Alice in Wonderland and John Carter of Mars are another example of such classical isekais. Although this video isn't about regression, their histories are very similar, as regression too has always existed in human storytelling. the isekai we know and love today, moreover, the transmigration stories we love today, didn't take form until the late 70s and early 80s. Again, the history of isekai and how from it transmigration came about is contested, but some of the most influential works I found being talked about were Aura Butler Dunban, Warrior from Another World, Legend of Heavenly Spear, and El Hazard, The Magnificent World. Another notable manga series is Magic Knight Ren-Earth. It was first serialized in 1993 until 1995, then it got 2 anime series in 1994, and later an OVA and also an RPG game. The series follows 3 8th grade girls who find themselves transported from then modern day Tokyo into a magical world called, I'm going with Seafire, and I'm sorry. In the first series, they are tasked with rescuing Princess Emeralda. The abducted princess is the literal peril of Seafire. She maintains the world via prayer. While she is kidnapped, she has a Bella moment and falls in love with her abductor, Zagato. Abductor? I hardly know her. Since she's so filled with love for Zagato, she can no longer pray for the world. Because we all know women can only do 2 things: have a boyfriend or save the world. The plot twist is that since no one from Savaro, I'm saying this different every single time, Savaro can harm the pillar, aka our princess, she was in fact the one to lock herself away and summon the 3 middle schoolers from Tokyo to kill her. The girls kill Zagato, the princess becomes unhinged, seeking revenge for the death of her lover, leaving the protagonist no choice but to kill her, just like the princess wanted. The girls then are magically transported back to Tokyo. The end. I wanted to call out this manga because the timing and its popularity is a good example of why this is considered pre-modern and not modern in my self-imposed timeline. This series was popular enough to attract an international fan basis and its own spin-offs, but didn't necessarily include all of the tropes we see in shoujo manga today. The genesis of the modern era begins with the birth of everyone's favorite, Inuyasha, where a modern-day middle schooler girl is transported into the Sengoku period after falling into a well in her family's shrine. A classic isekai story, and the one I'm going to go more in depth about is Bubu Jingxing. Bubu Jingxing is a 2005 Chinese web novel translated to every step of the way. It's another very common talked about first transmigration story in which a 21st century woman, Zhang Xiao, gets hit by good old Truck-kun. When she awakes, she finds herself in the body of Ruoshi, the daughter of a Manchu aristocrat and the younger sister of a concubine, Emperor's 8th son, Yingqing, during the Qing dynasty, more specifically the year 1704, during the Kangxi Emperor's reign. Okay, note, maybe my reading comprehensions aren't very good, especially after all the years I've done only math, but I couldn't tell if the main character was the concubine or if her sister was the concubine. I'm going with the sister because I think that makes more sense in the plot. Anyways, back to the description. Ruoshi becomes close with the emperor's other sons, including the 4th prince, who is most likely to inherit the throne after the crown prince, the 14th prince, and the 13th prince. Using her charm and wit, she wins the emperor's favor and becomes his lady-in-waiting. She and Yinxi then fall in love, but break up because of the fight for succession. Ruoshi falls in love with the 4th prince. The 4th prince gets framed for treason by none other than the salty ex-lover Yinxi, who got the idea from his ex, from our girl. The god-sent 13th brother saves the day, and he takes the blame for the treason. Yinxi then finds out about his brother and his ex-lover's love affair, driving him mad. The crown prince loses his position after some secrets about his crimes come to light. The emperor then starts to show support for the 14th prince. Then he offers up our girl as his concubine. She declines and gets demoted to a laundry maid. Oh my god, wait, no wonder this sounded so familiar. It's like that one K-drama with IU. Dude, I used to watch this all the time. When I wanted to cry but I couldn't get myself to, I would put this on play because all the men in the show just abuse her. Like, they all take advantage and treat her like an object, and she's just so sweet and kind and so sad. I got so angry watching it, and it always makes me cry. Anyways, maybe one day I can make a full video comparing the K-drama versus the original Chinese novel. This story is very dramatic and heavy on the romantic plot lines and gained a large following in many countries. The Genesis period formed a lot of the big hitters of the isekai genre, where I think collectively made everyone hooked on these tropes, starting with Inuyasha and ending with two significant works, Sword Art Online and Familiar of Zero. The Familiar of Zero was first published as a light novel in 2004 on the website Naro. Familiars of Zero's popularity on this website caused more isekai web novels to be published, including fanfics of the Familiar of Zero itself, that went on to become their own popular works like ReZero. A big part of the boom in this genre, and thus in transmigration stories, is this self-published web novels written as fanfics, where the main characters are transported into whatever fictional world the author is a fan of. The most commonly mentioned isekai I saw discussed when talking about the shift in the genre's popularity was around Sword Art Online, which I feel no need to talk in depth about because this video is for the girls, days, and gays. Moving on. After the release of Sword Art Online in 2012, the isekai hype train was in full steam ahead, leading to more and more isekai web novels being published and then later adapted into shows and web comics. It was around this time when the term isekai was coined. OP. What are the main isekais that set the trope for the rest to copy? Sword Art Online. I feel like this was the first one to do the RPG style well. There was, of course, Dot Hack before it, and perhaps others, but it actually made it fun. Well, I disagree. SAO is shit. It's not even good isekai. Hell, it isn't even one after the first part. There were isekais before it, but I think the most influential modern isekai is Familiar of Zero. It started the harem trend, and a lot of the influenced light novels started as web novels on a website where Familiar of Zero fanfic was big. If you want to be technical, it wasn't even an anime that started it. It was a multimedia franchise start. Well, that's just inaccurate. The first popularized isekai was prior to Doc Hack, with shows like 12 Kingdoms, the vision of, I don't know how to say that, are similar. In the first isekai story would probably be Alice in Wonderland, if you don't include the numerous hero travels to underworld, fairyland, etc. from mythology, even if you ignore them for not being much like modern isekai, a fair argument. You get why there's a lot of debate, right? Yeah. To me, the modern era refers to the boom of the genre and the insane oversaturation that accompanied it. With animes like Meiji Toko Renka, The Devil's a Part-Timer, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, ReZero, Starting Life in Another World, being such examples of modern isekai anime. The fact that the Japanese word isekai has now been added into the Oxford English Dictionary in March of 2024 is a prime example of how large this genre has become. You might have noticed up until this point a large amount of the media I've mentioned is Shojin, like the moon and the sun, the left and the right. Naturally, Shojo versions of the isekai genre emerged. Instead of harems, we get reverse harems. Instead of jiggly boobs, we get wall slabs. Instead of heart-racing fights, we get heart-racing meet cues. Since we've established the overall history of isekai and subsequently transmigration, we can better understand the trope of being reborn as a villainess. Again, the origins are debated, but a fascinating argument I found for the first one was none other than the 1994 ultimate dating game sim Angelique. Angelique was the first ultimate game which came out during my self-imposed pre-modern isekai era, ultimate games being a genre of dating sim games made specifically for women. Angelique established so many classic manga tropes and is still getting spin-offs to this day. This game set so many precedents in the transmigration genre. Angelique incorporates your basic blank canvas heroine and your basic petty love rival, aka your villainess. Another feature that sets it apart from the ultimate games is the fact that both the heroine and the villainess are playable characters who can compete for the target love interest. It also has a magical imperial setting, again becoming the precedent for the world building in these transmigration tropes. The plot is as follows. A 17-year-old girl named Angelique Lemongaze, moving on, has been chosen by the queen as one of 2 candidates for becoming the queen's successor. I'm glad to see that the weird trope of giving the protagonist of transmigration stories confusing and hard to pronounce names has always been around. The story follows her journey of competing in this new queen examination, and as you can probably guess, the other candidate is our villain, the baddie Rosalina de Cartagena. Totally butchered that, but to be fair, what even is this name? Her character design is so much better than Miss Lemon or whatever her last name is. The examination is also very interesting. You are tasked with populating a land. God, I love Imperial dating sim. With the help of 9 guardians who can use their powers to make her subjects happy or to devastate your rival's land. You must populate your land before your rival to become the new queen. Now, it's time for the hot men. Hot men! You can date the 9 guardians, duh. You can date Julio's guardian of light. You can date Cavius, guardian of darkness, our emo boy. Luvia, guardian of earth. Luvia, more like larva. Ooh. Oscar, guardian of fire. Luminale, guardian of water. Olive, guardian of dream. Also, dream, what does that mean? Are you supposed to be Luna from MLP? Like, what does that mean? Then you can also date Randy. Randy. Ew. Suddenly I like the made-up name so much better than this one. The vaguely French, at least the vaguely French names gives me some vibe of hotness. Whereas this guy, he's just like, I'm Randy, what's up? But anyways, Randy is the guardian of wind. We also have Zappel, guardian of steel. He wears these like weird little biker shorts. You also have Marcel, guardian of green. Guardian of green? What does that mean? What does that mean? Sometimes you just have to turn off your brain. Sometimes you just have to turn off your brain. In this game, there's only 2 endings. A love ending, aww, and a queen ending.
We never cry.
If you fall in love, you must give up being a queen, girl boss, or die. This game went on to make version after version, spin-off anime after spin-off anime, manga after manga, OVA after OVA. You get the idea. My new 2025 dream goal is to stream playing the first Angelique. I just want to flirt with Calvis so bad. Actually, after I finally saw the pictures of them, I think I need to date Olivier, or however the fuck you say his name. Because who is this fruity diva? OMG, we are both Libras too? Stop! Olivier is scratching that bisexual itch in all the right ways. Side note, Randy's character description says he likes captivating scents. No duh, homie. It's fucking captivating. You're just gonna decide you dislike likable things. I know you are one of 2 age-appropriate love interests. And you know what? I would like to ship you with our girl, but you were so boring. You were so boring. I think I just need to play to decide, honestly. Another largely talked about transmigration story I saw on Reddits and other forums was the story Kenkyo Kenjitsu wo Moto ni Ikai Onomatsu, aka My Motto is Living Honestly and Humbly. It's a 2013 web novel, so in the Genesis period, which makes sense as it is one of the first full-fledged Reborn as a Villainess stories I could find. Again, heavily debated. There could be a story that I'm missing that came out before this. This was just one of the ones that I could track down, so I figured even if it's not technically the first, it's the first to be in the cultural zeitgeist of the world as a Reborn as Villainess story. I digress. In this story, our main character, while on her way to her first day at elementary school, regains her memories of her previous life, where she learns that she is actually one of the characters from a manga that she once read. That character being the villainess who bullied the original protagonist of the manga. In the original story, her character is destined to die by the hands of the Emperor, so our transmigrated villainess vows she will not let this happen. To her disappointment, her world is at a standstill when she doesn't act accordingly, as it cannot progress without a villainess. I've actually never read this one, but I will after this video. A year after My Motto is Living Honestly and Humbly was released, we got another big name in the Reborn as a Villainess genre, and that is MNLV, short for MNLVARLD, short for My Next Life as a Villainess, all routes lead to doom. MNLV, My Next Life as a Villainess, was first a Japanese light novel, first published on Naruto, later getting an anime adaptation in 2020. I did watch MNLV, My Next Life as a Villainess, but truth be told, I didn't really remember it, so I did have to rewatch some of it. MNLV, My Next Life as a Villainess, story is similar to the last one we talked about, but with a video game meta. Our MC is transmigrated as a noble lady named Katrina. She regains her past life's memory as a teenage otaku, learning that she's now in the body of the villainess of an otome game and must save herself from the bad ending of being killed or exiled, hence the whole ARLD part of the whole MNLVARDL acronym. Of course, the OG Otome game is filled with a reverse harem, which Katrina must navigate to survive, distorting the once scripted relationships to something totally different, and falling in love in the process. Another tangent, but the capital of the kingdom in MNLV, My Next Life of the Villainess, is giving Central Drive in Saskatoon. If you know, you know. Did I just out myself as a prairie girl? How embarrassing! An article by Gabriella Calozo puts it, what made this series such a success and breeder of more villainous content is the fact that it subverts the male power fantasy of isekai. The villainous niche explicitly centers around a female lead taking back her autonomy. These narratives offer a fresh perspective to the mass-produced isekai genre by turning it on its head and adding new stakes to the formula. Before we knew it, instead of playing otome dating games, girls could just simply read a web novel as if they were in the otome dating game themselves. The isekai genre, more specifically transmigration, allows for the YNification of any medium to occur. Adding on the villainess tag means not only are young girls experiencing their dream fantasy world from a protagonist they could project themselves onto, but also a really cool one who overcomes all odds in the name of her happiness. It's very obvious as to why this trope would train attraction. In many of today's light novels, manga, manhwa, etc., the trope of being reborn as a villainess has a few cliches that accompany it. Usually, the main character is an ordinary young woman, oftentimes a high schooler or a mundane office worker. They die a sudden death. IDK, maybe a drug queen comes swerving out of nowhere and kills you. Then the character reawakens in a body within a fictional world. That world is more often than not a historical European-inspired fantasy setting, with an imperial hierarchy of a royal family, dukes, marquises, barons, etc. And you better be damned, there will most definitely be at least one hot knight by our girl's side. Usually the setting also involves magical abilities like magical monsters, demons, priests with holy powers, magicians, and a mage tower that hates the imperial family. These are tropes often found in Shojo fantasy worlds. If I had a penny for every long-haired, glasses-wearing mage, I could be rich enough to be in Donald Trump's cabinet. This world also includes a handful of background characters, such as maids, butlers, etc., that are trusted confidants who the main character must win over in order to gain more power within her household. On a darker note, worlds like this also include some sort of slavery, with a common trope being that the villainess saves a boy from a slave auction house, winning his trust and thus his undying love. As for the sexist tones, given that these worlds are based on very sexist and patriarchal class systems found in early westernized civilizations, each author goes about writing it in different forms. Some choose to have a patriarchal world where women must get married at a young age. To empower the MC, they might include side characters who aren't as forceful with this ideology so that it doesn't come off as oppressive to the readers. Many writers use political marriages as the main plot device in their stories. My rule of thumb is even if you think the story won't have a marriage of convenience or a fake marriage trope in a transmigration Shojo story, it will still find a way to sneak itself in. Then we have writers who have the protagonist fight against the patriarchy to win her power and gain titles that she normally wouldn't be able to have. I just started reading this transmigration story. A single round at romance is enough, where the transmigrator is rebirthed as the main heroine, but she is in a society that is extremely sexist, to the point where her taking a political science course at school results in her being ostracized. We also have authors going against the grain and deciding that the patriarchy doesn't exist, cherry picking what laws or traditions they want to keep. In some rare occurrences, they even put in place a matriarchy. An example of this is the story I Don't Even Know Who the Child's Father Is, where a girl is transported into the web novel where she wakes up in the body of a villainess princess who is quite literally in the middle of giving birth.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. You get your goddamn ugly ass on.
Imagine you're like on your way to work and then suddenly you're in 1800 England birthing a baby. I be shitting birds, or I guess I'm be shitting babies. That's not how birth works. In this story, since she doesn't retain any of her new body's old memories and never finished the novel in her first life, she is unsure of who is the real baby daddy. Instead of worrying about the biological father, she decides whoever she falls in love with will become the father, and the story follows her dating all of these men. Obviously, the trope we see in other stories of the MC being forced into marriage is not applicable here, as she has a lot of power and her having a baby out of wedlock and being promiscuous never casts a shadow on her character, and more importantly, it never affects her right to the throne. Sometimes it's not a historical fantasy world based on European traditions. Sometimes it's a historical fantasy world based on East Asia. For example, Benki Clan's Unwanted Granddaughter, where our main character is transmigrated into the body of the bastard child of the son of the head of the clan. This takes place in a historical fantasy East Asian inspired world with a large emphasis on martial arts. In this story, she tries to take in the main villain and rehabilitate him into becoming a good guy. And from all the spoilers I've seen, it doesn't work, which I'm really sad about because he was my main ship, RIP. Sometimes it is a modern day setting. Sometimes it's not a fictional book you go into, but instead a TV show or a game. For example, I'm in the same class as the crazy male leads, where the MC is transmigrated into a story she wrote, which takes place in modern day Korea in a high school setting. Another example is Terrarium Adventures, where your average college student gets transmigrated into a mobile game called Infinite Dia, one of those shitty clicker games that have fever dreams for ads and snake oil for gameplay. She achieves a shit ton of diamonds in the game and gets transported into it, where she discovers the real story of the game, makes friends and lovers along the way, and also lives a life filled with wealth. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a fantasy world either. Another example is the web series Go Princess Go, which I know from its K-drama adaptation, Mr. Queen, where a modern day womanizer, a celebrity chef, is transmigrated into the body of a queen during the Joseon period. In their new life as a queen, he learns to appreciate people more, becoming less Hongdae fuckboy coded, and accidentally makes the king fall in love with him. This genre can be expanded into basically any fictional world, any media that we consume. It is not a constrictive genre and can be wielded to express many different facets of human experience. Additionally, the many different facets of humans' fantasies. In these transmigration stories, we see a few recurring twists where the character isn't necessarily transmigrated as the OG heroine. The wording might get complicated here, so just know when I say OG female lead, OG villainess, or OG blah blah blah, I mean to refer to the fictional book's original roles for those characters pre-transmigration. If I don't say OG, then I mean that is the role for that character in the medium we are consuming. I feel like my explanation may be more confusing than it actually is, but you get the idea. In this transmigration genre, we see an onslaught of different versions of characters the protagonist will inhabit. The character could be a sibling to the OG main character or to the OG villain, like in An Unseeming Lady, where the transmigrator is the younger sister of the OG protagonist, and she uses her cuteness and innocence to manipulate her sister and her sister's love interest so that the OG male lead doesn't win the heart of her sister. Or we could look at Taming My Villainous Little Brother, where she is reborn as the twin sister of the BL's OG lead, and the OG obsessive male lead falls in love with her, turning straight. She changes their fate, avoiding her death by the original obsessive male lead's hands. Maybe they are a character who is going to have a tragic death later. They could also be a completely new character who didn't exist in the original, like trapped in a cursed game as an NPC. Or they could simply be an extra, like in my derelict favorite, with the most frequent being transmigrating into the body of a villainess. And that is how we get the reborn as a villainess trope. There are times when they're a minor villain with nothing but petty crimes and gossiping to their name. Other times they are the OG main big bad of the story, committing heinous crimes left and right. No matter what character they awaken as, the plotline that follows includes near-death experiences, at least a love triangle, and our heroine doing everything in her power to avoid her scripted downfall. When people are transmigrated into a fictional world, there are a few different types of transmigrations. One, you wake up in the world as a fetus, conceived into the character's body. You can have all of the memories from your past life as a newborn, so not only do you know exactly how everything is going to unfold, but you're also insanely smart and mature as a child, maybe making it hard for you to fit in with other characters. Another version of this is the same thing, but instead of retaining the memories of your past life, due to some circumstance, you suddenly regain your past life memories. For example, you could be living your life out as it normally would have gone in the fictional world. Then say you turn a certain age, or maybe you have a near-death experience, which awakens your memory from your past life, making you realize that the life you're currently living is in a fictional world. Then you turn tides, start acting differently, and question the things around you. When rewatching the first episode of MNLV, My Next Life as a Villainess, I couldn't help but wonder what the moral implications of this type of transmigration was. Katerine, after she hits her head at the age of 7 or 8, goes through this whole ordeal of recalling her past life, suddenly being flooded with 1 million memories of her life as a 17-year-old modern day Japanese girl, and realizing that she is the villainess in an autumn reverse harem dating sim game. When she regains consciousness, the people around her are shocked by her immediate change in demeanor. To me, this makes sense because she recalls her distinct life where the structure of society was less strict than her present life. And now she has the mind of a 17-year-old in a child's body, making her more mature in that sense. When I say the moral implications, I mean the implications of her pre-gaining her memories, when she was that spoiled brat who threatened to fire her maids just because they didn't have a pink bow on hand. That person is still a part of Catherine, meaning that the soul is both this 17-year-old otaku and also this spoiled brat. How does an author approach this? Do they sometimes still act out? Do they criticize their past actions in which they acted like a carbon copy of the villainess? In that case, does that mean she was the original villainess and this is a parallel universe where she just so happens to awaken the memories of her past life, and in other universes when she doesn't awaken those memories she would have just lived out her life as the villainess leading to her doom? Does that mean then that reincarnation is real and everyone's soul has gone through some sort of reincarnation? Maybe it's not special that she was reborn, that she was transmigrated, but it's special that she reawakened her memories. It almost feels like commentary on nature versus nurture. Like, does this mean our character's soul is at its core that bratty villainess? Or is it that the environment in which she was raised in her second life caused her to become that bratty villainess? I'm talking about those types of implications. I am inclined to argue that it's strange she remembered her past life, not that it was strange that she was transmigrated. And I say this because we see her friend, I forget her name, it starts with an A. We see her friend having glimpses into her past life, her otaku best friend in Japan, but doesn't 100% recall these memories vividly in this life. This reincarnation, in a sense, happens to every soul. Going back to the actual plot line of MNLV, My Next Life as a Villainess, given that she dead ass injures herself twice after that first injury, I would say, yeah, that's the same soul. You know how I say usually in these transmigration stories, the main characters are super smart and wins over others with her wits. This girl in MNLV, My Next Life as a Villainess, is not one of those. She decides the best way to avoid her bad ending is to befriend everyone, train in combat, and learn how to farm. That way, even when faced with death or exile, she at least has a fighting chance. Her stupidity and quirkiness is her charm, and she quickly wins over everyone, making everyone fall in love with her. Some faster than others, some incestier than others, and some gayer than others. Season 1 ends with everyone somewhat confessing their feelings to her by declaring they never want to leave her side. And then she says, "Yay, a secret friend ending, yippee!" Our girl is a bit dense, so of course she is not going to get what they fully mean that easily. The anime is a fun watch though if you haven't already. Then we have the second scenario where you are suddenly transported from your original body into the new body in the fictional world. You could end up in the body of a toddler or you could end up in the body of some full-grown woman giving birth like we've already discussed. In this case, you are automatically aware that you have transmigrated. In the case of randomly awakening in a new body versus being fully rebirthed, I find it a bit more compelling how the author chooses to write in the memories of the original character. Like, does the transmigrator get to see the old memories of the OG character, or do they have no attachment to the world? How does this impact how they view and interact with the new world around them? Is there any similarities between the original character and the transmigrator? Does the transmigrator find a way to sympathize with the original person they've stolen their body from and thus come to understand the OG character's once irrational actions? Or do they not care at all about this character's life and choose to do things completely on their own? Does the original character's emotion and trauma still physically manifest in their body? Does the original character come back to haunt the transmigrator? What happened to the original character's soul? Does the transmigrator even care about what happened to them? Do they have an internal dialogue about the conflict and the guilt of having a new life but taking that away from someone else? In this story, Master Villainess the Invincible, a historical fantasy, vaguely Korean martial arts world where a failing author transmigrates into the body of the OG villainess. Not commonly found in these transmigration stories, but she is given all of the body's past memory, which is why I wanted to bring it up here. She is able to recall her previous murder attempts on the OG female lead and repent accordingly. Being frightened by her impending doom, aka her death, she leaves for her maternal grandfather's villa. She becomes extremely strong as a martial artist, falls in love with the mysterious and quirky next head of her grandfather's clan, and tries to stop the secret uprising that wasn't addressed properly in the original book. Good read, cute characters, good action plots. I love a powerful woman. Regardless of how the transmigrator comes into the world and body, I believe an important part of writing in this genre is to examine how the transmigrator, if any, forms an attachment to this new foreign world and body. Stuff like this I always find so intriguing, as every author goes about it a different way, and I think it really shows the tone of the story and also the intentions of our protagonists. It can show you how determined they are to be happy and get rid of any complications. Readers can witness how the transmigrator is able to overcome their trauma in their first life by finally having the power and conviction to change things in their present. I find that with the first scenario of being physically reborn into their new body, there is an inherent attachment to their new life and their families. As for the second version, more backstory from the transmigrator's previous life is needed to ground their actions in the fictional world. A common trope used in these stories is that in the original book, the OG villainess has a one-sided crush on the OG male lead. Because of this, she does everything in her power to tear apart the OG female lead and the OG male lead from being together. Think your classic kimchi slap, splashing water on the female lead's face type of villainess activities. Usually, the male lead hates the villainess, but because of political reasons, they are engaged, and it isn't until he falls in love with the OG female lead that they break apart their engagement. Then, once the OG ship gets together, they tend to celebrate their marriage with a classic kill the villainess after party, no one mourns the wicked or whatever. Usually, the villainess's hatred for the OG female lead comes from two scenarios. Either she has a dark backstory with a broken family that explains why she is such a menace, or she's such a spoiled brat that doesn't know how to act when she doesn't get her way. In the second scenario, the OG villainess would go after the OG male lead with the same spoiled brat energy and thus is enraged at the OG female lead for taking what's hers. In the former, she could be a daughter of a tyrant who has been beaten down and used to obliteration, thus too scared to disobey and goes along with everything out of fear of retribution. In this version, the OG male lead usually doesn't know about her living conditions. Nonetheless, the ending of the OG villainess is always death, charged with some version of treason, either because she tried to kill the OG female lead and the male lead wasn't having it, stuff like that. When the transmigrator takes over the villainess's body, we often see an immediate personality change, and it's usually accompanied by family members, maids, butlers, etc., noticing this change and over time opening up to her. The transmigrator's engagement with the OG male lead, usually a duke or crown prince, is then called off as the transmigrator wants to avoid her death. One way or another, this provokes the OG male lead into falling in love with her. Sometimes the transmigrator reciprocates those feelings, and sometimes the OG male lead just becomes the second male lead in our story. It's often written that their engagement isn't broken off as swiftly as our main character would like, due to the opposition from the OG male lead, keeping their engagement as a way to manipulate her into staying in their relationship. The villainess proves to others that she is a changed woman, typically opening up a blooming business or gaining a magical skill that's unprecedented and unparalleled, gains more and more power, and all the people adore her. She uses her knowledge of the OG story to gain power and maneuver the plotline in her favor. Sometimes she even intervenes in terrorist attacks or assassination attempts. In some cases, we even see her save the big bad villain from turning into a villain. A shoujo is not complete until we find a male lead, of course. So at some point in our story, our villainess will fall in love. She could fall in love with the OG male lead of the book, or someone else entirely. We see plot lines of our male lead being a knight that never existed in the original story, or maybe it's the OG second lead, or maybe it's a character who was mentioned briefly in the story and alluded to having a deeper, darker backstory, but never mentioned again. One of my favorites being the love interest is another villain. For example, where the male lead is the brother of the OG female lead, and the second lead is the OG second lead. In this story, they flirt while preparing for an apocalypse. I'm a big fan of this art style. You could also take a look at It Was Love at First Sight, Mr. Villain, where the transmigrated character pretends to be in love with the OG villain, who is said to be her killer, but they end up falling in love, and she gets the sneaking suspicion that the gorgeous blonde-haired Duke isn't actually her future killer, but maybe it's the edgelord of an ex she once had instead. We could also take a look at one of the cutest, heartwarming romances long after the ending, where the transmigrated protagonist, once a student studying to take the civil servant exam, now lives in the body of the villainess, Elena Taylor. Once engaged to the OG male lead, but he broke it off to marry the OG female lead, solidifying the end of the OG story. Since awakening as Elena, she couldn't help but admire the beauty of everyone in this fantasy world. So she starts rizzing them up and gets kicked out of her house, then decides to open up a business, a romance counseling company. The story then follows her as she's hired by the concerned mother of the original second lead, who is all sad and let himself go since his love for the OG female lead will never be returned. She helps him get his life back on track. He becomes quite taken with her and learns that she's not quite like all the rumors. And just like a classic Hallmark movie, they fall in love in a small town. Side note, but I'm a huge fan of this like art style, the perfectly imperfect vibes, although there are times when the imperfect part is taken a little bit too far.
Hell no, man. What the fuck?
When the villainess falls in love with the OG male lead of the story, usually we get an internal dialogue of her not wanting to admit that she loves him because she knows that the OG female lead is going to show up and sweep him off of his feet, leaving our girl behind in the dust. Usually it takes reassurance and time for this to go away and for their relationship to progress. An example of this is How to Win My Husband Over, where our protagonist had a miserable life, then gets reincarnated as a villainess who is the daughter of the Pope, who's a horrible man, and her brother, well, technically half-brother, is obsessed with her, beats her, and tries to have incest moments with her. Ew! I fucking hate him. Our transmigrator is married off to the OG male lead, but he turns out to be not what she was expecting in a good way. They end up becoming friends and then lovers. The brother is a horrible, horrible, horrible man, and same with her father, but mostly the brother. This one is technically josei, meaning that it has adult themes, hence the whole like torture, beating, incest plot lines. If I could isekai, I would isekai into this story just so I could cut off her brother's, feed it to him, and then kill him. It handles emotions of the past and the present of our character so well, and she's always so anxious that like she can't fully be in love with this guy because he's going to meet the female lead and fall in love with her instead. It's so well done. The author never forgets the fact that it's a transmigration story and uses that as a way to give more depth into our main character's thoughts and actions. Though it is not a story for the faint of heart, so be warned. There is another huge trope of one of the characters of the fictional world not being what they seem. Typically, it's the OG female lead who turns out to be a trashka, aka a character who uses their cuteness and femme fatalité against others to manipulate and gaslight them into doing her bidding, a little conniving bitch. One way or another, the transmigrator is able to expose to others the OG female's intent. An example that I'll mention more in depth is Trapped in a Soap Opera, where the OG female lead is batshit crazy. I know there are a lot of others out there, but this is just like one I read recently. In other stories, we have the original female lead becoming obsessed with the transmigrator, becoming best friends and secretly lovers, but they were just roommates or whatever. An example of this is I Don't Want to Be Magpie Bridge, a story about a girl named Shushu who learns she's a side character in the book at age 5, the childhood best friend of the OG protagonist who is set to die soon. The OG protagonist and Shushu really strengthen their friendship to the point where her ideal boyfriend is Shushu. I don't think the story lingers too much on the emotional depths of Transmigration. It definitely is more of a fun, lighthearted read. So if you're ever looking for something to read while you're on the train, 10 out of 10 recommend. To me, a good transmigration story should address a few overarching questions. How does the transmigrator in the new world adjust? Does she feel disconnected? Does she have a hard time relating to other characters? How does she treat this world? Confronting these internal conflicts might ultimately lead the story down a rabbit hole of darker thoughts. So I do understand why authors write a comical stories wouldn't necessarily touch upon these themes. I do find it very hard to believe that if a person was transmigrated into her favorite piece of literature, she would just accept it like a piece of cake. Having everything changed around you, instantaneously thrown into a different culture and a world that you have a very limited knowledge about. And you're telling me that these women would just accept the scenario and not have a hard time adjusting at all? I always find that incredibly hard to believe. And maybe I'm just complaining at this point, but whenever people do answer these questions and having the character having a hard time adjusting to their new environment, the comment section of these novels and manhwas are just like, oh, she's so annoying. Why can't you just be happy? I always get so annoyed because like reading those, it's just so unrealistic. Like, of course she's gonna have a hard time adjusting. No one is going to wake up in another body in another world, especially one that's like a historical fantasy world, and just be chill with it. Even if it was their like favorite fanfic or whatever. It's more unrealistic to me that a modern day woman could just simply pick up 18th century etiquette as if it's nothing. Those people nitpick like crazy. You have to eat with certain spoons for certain things. You have to bend at a certain angle, put your feet at a certain degree, shit like that. And you're telling me these people just transmigrate and know it? Like, huh? Sometimes the author will address this stuff by saying muscle memory, but you know what? I rest my case. I also find it really heartwarming when characters are able to tell another character about their transmigration story. Then they're able to open up and have a friend that they can rely on. I love when this happens, and truthfully, it does not happen enough. Although the story isn't a transmigration one, it is an isekai and shares a lot of the same story beat. It's called Inso's Law. The MC is isekai into the world of her favorite romance book. And here notice I say isekai, not transmigration, because she keeps her original body. She becomes friends with the main characters and a lovely and healing friendship blossoms. And of course, the male leads start a little love triangle over her. It is an adorable coming of age rom-com. In this world, everything is the same as in her OG world, except for her high school and her new classmates. They have been transported from the book into this dimension, or rather, their worlds have converged as the main character will sometimes flicker through this like parallel universe and go back to her first world without her friends in it. This is why I wanted to bring it up, because she has this mental breakdown where she is terrified about her suddenly disappearing from this world, leaving her newfound friends behind, and even worse, what if they completely forget about her and move on as if she has never existed in the first place. After disappearing from this world once due to this reality shifty thingy, everyone temporarily forgets about her existence. Once she comes back to their dimension, she is pushed to her limit and opens up to her friends. They all believe her and devise a plan to never forget her no matter what happens. It is so cute and wholesome, where they all just take her side and stand up for her, and she's able to share with them this crazy, unbelievable story. I also really like when a character doesn't forget their past life so easily. If a character has trauma from the past life, that trauma should still carry over in their thoughts and actions in their new transmigrated life. A simple example I can think of is Death is the Only Ending for the Villainess. This story is about an avid ultimate dating sim player who decides to play the hardest route on her game, the villainess route. She then is transmigrated into the body of the illegitimate child and the villainess, Penelope Eclair. Bro, these fucking names. Through this story, she recalls her first life, where she too was born as a illegitimate child, so her older brothers held a lot of contempt and hostility towards her, constantly neglecting and mistreating her at every turn. This PTSD from her first life is reflected in her actions and feelings in her second. When her new stepbrothers, and I want to say stepbrothers here because here too there is this gross incesty vibe. Bro, I just want to reborn as a villainess in peace without incest. Why can't you let me do that? Anyways, her stepbrothers and her new life, when they mistreat her and harass her, she's reminded of her first trauma and lashes out appropriately. Since she doesn't have existing attachments to this world, her trauma and the parallels to the childhood of the villainess that she now possesses is what grounds her and brings her into this reality, having emotional outbursts, and rightfully so in my opinion. This trauma response also gives her a hard time forming relationships with her new brothers. A really cool plotline in this story is that the first couple of books all takes place pre-OG female lead entering, and the later half is about the actual gameplay that a girl knows, which means that the stakes are elevated and her anxiety is at an all-time high. She is also able to see her target's love interest heartometer, which tells her how much someone likes her back. Once the OG female lead comes into play, the heartometer disappears and our girl can't see it anymore and has a big breakdown. I can't blame her. This was her reminder that this is a game, this is not real life. Now, without it, not only does she not know whether or not she's succeeding, but she is also getting more and more confused. Also, the Crown Prince. I would have feral for that man. Stuff like this gives the character so much more depth. The whole premise of transmigrating gives authors leeway to play with the idea of trauma and identity. How much is trauma linked to you as a person? How much of it can you escape? And how much does it affect you? They can say a lot about the human psyche via the transmigration genre. I mentioned this before, but I understand when the author wants a comedic, light-hearted story, so they might be scared to talk about such psychological and dark topics that are inherent in the isekai and transmigration tropes. I have only started to read this one last night, so I cannot speak on how it ends. It's called Flower and the Beast. I have found the first few chapters to do a good job at balancing the reality of losing your entire life and the comedic tones of whatever lollygagging activities in her second life is coming her way. The trauma of being lonely, losing her husband and child in her past life bleeds over into her life where she is afraid of blood. It isn't on the forefront of her mind, but it is brought up often enough that it doesn't become jarring when the transmigrator gets anxious. This webtoon is not my favorite. The drawing is a little wonky. The main character is a bit dense. There is an obscene amount of thought bubbles in any scene, but goddamn, the panels in this series always leave me laughing. If you are one of those webtoon readers who likes to screenshot random out-of-pocket moments to use later for like meme material, this webtoon is a gold mine. The other question authors have to ask themselves while writing a transmigration story is, what role does the physical transmigration have on the plot? What I mean by this is the author the god of this world? Was the transmigrator chosen for a reason? Was it fate, or was it a random draw of luck? Does God or the writer, whatever you want to call it, have control over the domain of the fictional world? Are other characters aware that they live in a fictional world? Even better, is this truly a fictional world, or is it just another dimension? Does this world have complete autonomy from the medium it was written from, or is it bound by the rules of that book, TV show, etc.? An example of this is Trapped in a Soap Opera. In this story, a writer for a TV show gets her screenplay stolen by a head writer. One of her coworkers gives her a watch saying she will find true happiness via this watch. This watch, a la Lovely Runner style, transports her into the world of that show she had written, where she is the villainess. She treats people with kindness and overcomes many obstacles, causing the male leads to fall in love with her and for her rich family to regain trust in her. The twist is within how the fictional world is controlled. When they are on air, the watch will signal to the villainess that she must play her role accordingly. In short, she has to be mean to the OG heroine. She later finds out that this role will be satisfied as long as she gets some type of extreme reaction from the metaphorical audience. Another well-written transmigration, or should I say reverse transmigration, is the story Rewriting the Villainess, where a high schooler writes a book based on her and her friends in a fantasy historical world. The writer suffers from social anxiety and is heavily insecure. She uses the power of the book she wrote to call the badass villainess from the book to take over her life in the real world. The villainess lives as her, goes to school as her, and finds out the reason why the author wanted to disappear in the first place. She meets the author in this dream freaky spatial world where they talk and get to know each other, and through the power of their friendship, the transmigrated or the reverse transmigrated villainess is able to help the teenage writer overcome her trauma, regaining her life back and her will to live. They then switch back bodies. I think it was a good ending for the message of the story, but I still wasn't, in love with it. I know I've mentioned a lot of stories in this video already, but these are the ones I'm labeling S tier, okay? 1. The reason why Raylina ended up at the Duke's mansion. 2. I'm no heroine. And 3. Surviving romance. I'm so sorry if I said that name wrong. I've butchered every single weird, vaguely French English oldie name ever. I don't know how English works. I'm so sorry. Actually, you know what? Don't know if I guess I'm sorry. One of my favorite well-written transmigration stories is the reason why Renalia ended up at the Duke's mansion. Only until researching for this video did I realize that this story had an anime, so don't worry, I will go watch that after this. A student trying to get into university gets pushed off a roof by a mysterious person. When she opens her eyes, she is transmigrated into the body of Raeliana Macmillan, the only daughter of a baron who is new money in the nobles. In the original story, Raeliana is a minor character destined to be murdered by her current fiance. The OG novel goes something like this. The heroine tries to solve the murder of her BFF, Renalia, or whatever the fuck I call her, then falls in love with the Duke, Noah, Why Knight. My name and my explanation for that were trash. He is your average, dark hair, mysterious, sometimes cold but charming to his love interest, Cold Duke. His version of cold though is smiling even though he isn't happy. If you know what I mean, that kind of Two-Face character vibes. Renalia. To avoid her murder, Renalia, while at a ball, decides it's time to put, her thoughts into action. So she approaches Duke Noah and asks him for a contractual engagement. And like the title of the story, Renalia ends up living in the Duke's mansion. The two of them end up falling in love, yada yada yada. The main character also has multiple internal dialogues with herself where she feels so much guilt for taking over this body. Like when she tells her parents that she wants to call off her original engagement so that she can get engaged with the Duke. Her parents say, "We love you and we will always support you and your love." Then she thinks to herself, "I can see how much they care about my well-being. I feel so lucky, but I feel so ashamed." She says to them, "Thank you," then trails off and finishes her internal dialogue with, "I am not your daughter. The truth I couldn't speak ate at my soul." I love her. She has such like a hard time adjusting to her new life, and she talks about how like the culture, status, race, everything in this world is different, which so many don't address this. When she meets the Duke's trusted knight, who is from a foreign country and is extremely discriminated against, she doesn't treat him with contempt or approach him any differently than she does with other people in this world, because she doesn't have that pre-established internalized racism that other characters do. One of the comments I read at this chapter reads, "I honestly really appreciate this depiction of racism in a fantasy setting. Incredibly nuanced compared to a lot of the ham-fisted portrayals you see out there. Elma the maid lives in a world where her views aren't unusual, as Renelia, the protagonist, notes herself. Chances are that Elma has never had those views challenged, and that's probably how she was raised. If Adam is from a discriminated group in this world and Elma somehow didn't feel that group was monstrous or dangerous despite being taught that they're bad news her entire life by her family, society, etc., there would need to be some explanation as to why she feels differently. Has she had any interactions with anyone from that race, etc.? It makes perfect sense why the MC doesn't feel that way at all. She was literally dropped into this world and did not grow up in the same environment with those biases. There is another time when the knight spins her around to check if there's any scratches on her, and she just thinks to herself, oh, he's probably just, wants to dance and is from a different culture, and obviously she doesn't know because she doesn't know anything about this world. She takes that as him trying to dance with her, and so then she does it right back to him, spinning around. Obviously, he's very confused because she has completely misread the entire situation. She's being so earnest with how she interacts with this world, both with misunderstanding it, but also with appreciating it with delight and not having this built up hatred to anyone or anything. Like, this is how a real person, if transmigrated, would act, with both the fantasism and also with the whole uncertainty that she has. A good example of addressing these questions while maintaining the calm in the rom-com would be the webtoon I'm No Heroine. In this story, a girl is transmigrated as Arinda Maleficent. I'm so bad. The villainess of the story, originally engaged to the crown prince and a love rival to the heroine. She decides she can't keep doing whatever she wants without a plan because she wants to get back to her original reality. So she figures she would follow the script, playing out the role of the villain as perfectly as she can. She has photogenic memory, so she can and does quite that. She does her role to a T and gets executed by the prince just like in the novel. But to her dismay, she reawakens to the time when she first transmigrated and is forced to live through the same storyline yet again. This time she decides to take a different approach. Instead of playing her role to perfection, she's going to be absolutely absent from the storyline, and yet she still gets killed by the crown prince. Once again, she wakes up to the very first day she was transmigrated. She decides, fuck it, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. She befriends all of the characters and has a lovely sapphic relationship with the original protagonist, who becomes her roommate. The original second lead develops a one-sided crush on her, and the third lead becomes her main interest. I absolutely adore him, Luke Oscar, with all my heart. He is one of those characters that's like, he's very talkative but still mysterious, and he loves to flirt. Usually these characters are designated to like second lead roles, so I was so happy and overjoyed when I found out he was the main love interest. I love these fruity characters so much. The part I really wanted to talk about is that she is always reminded by her own anxiety that these people are characters, that she can't get too close to them because they might turn their back on her, that one day they are all going to forget about her and fall in love with the original female lead. It's a huge point of contention within her mind, and later she has to overcome that and talk it through with her friends so that she can learn how to trust. Another issue she has throughout the entire story is this building resentment to the crown prince, especially after literally being killed by him twice. She cannot forgive and forget all of those past transgressions. She struggles to express to him and to her friends why she hates him so much. She's scared that no one will believe her. She has these conversations with Luke Oscar where she's struggling to express to him the truth behind why she hates the Crown Prince so much. And he says something like, "We believe you and trust you, and you have the right to feel this way, even if your predicament is so crazy and unbelievable." It's just like so reassuring to her character. Like you can tell that's exactly what she needed to hear. There's also these times when she starts picking up on the vibes that the other male leads are flirting with her, and she starts to question her insanity and her self-worth. Again, a very human reaction. I am the villain of the story. Is my personality really that impactful in their lives that it would take them away from the original plot line? How dare I think I am worth this much? She even says, "How could I, a mere villain, accept the love intended for the heroine?" That anxiety of like, oh, this didn't happen in the first two lives, and they still ended up falling in love with her, but yet now that like I'm being my true authentic self and having fun and opening up, you're telling me like I can receive love. There are these really adorable times where the four of the friends are hanging out, making these beautiful, precious memories, and then she will think to herself, "I'm so grateful for this life. I wish this life would never end, but also it might end in the blink of an eye, and they might forget all about me, or even worse, I might be executed and have to relive it all over again. What if in that life we don't become friends? What if this life was purely a fluke and I was never meant to be worthy of their friendship and love?" Here's some of her internal thoughts I had saved. She thinks to herself, "How much longer will I be able to live like this after ending the engagement? What if something goes wrong and I am sent back in time again? If our meeting in this life was entirely coincidental? If my fourth life follows the same path as the originals because this existence was merely the result of a sequence of overlapping coincidences? What if I never belong here?" That is so real. After going through that hell twice, being thrown into a fictional world, how can you not have so much anxiety? You know? How can you not question shit like that? My point with this story is that it handles the heavy emotional baggage of the isekai story and the rom-com of the shoujo genre so well. The tone shift from silly flirty antics to self-hatred and this anxiety is so well executed. Lastly, surviving romance. This story is about a young woman who is a bit tired from the hardships of modern day life. She gets transmigrated into the main character, Terin Un, of the story I'll Love You Every Day, a romance story. The transmigrator is very entitled at the beginning of this story. She loves the fact that she's become this girl. She loves when people try to hit on her. She compliments her looks every second. She loves the tension between her and the male lead. We open it up with it being an important day of the original story. The male lead is going to confess his love for her. She goes to meet him and she's surprised to find that he is a zombie. The surviving part of the surviving romance comes quite literally, as this story is about the zombie apocalypse at their school. The transmigrated world she is in is no longer a romance book, and she is forced to relive the same day over and over again until she survives and overcomes the apocalypse. And I'm like talking about 100 times over. Every time she gets killed by a zombie, boom, we're back on day one where the male lead is supposed to confess his feelings for her. And then she has to survive the apocalypse again, each time getting closer and closer to beating it. This completely changes her personality. She is now tough, no longer infatuated by love, and just wants this bullshit to be over. She learns how to overcome the apocalypse through friendship, and she like becomes friends with all the side characters that she used to ignore, and then she's forced to kill herself whenever they die and she doesn't want them to die. She also kind of has this like gay love story with one of her classmates. It's really cute. But then they find out this whole thing was orchestrated by the real main character who is fed up with living in the fantasy, which is why I wanted to put this on my list. One, I love the averting expectations, which is a huge thing in transmigration. It takes the genre into a new direction. and it still has friendship being a main focus, which is what like a lot of shoujo mangas like to center around, is like girlhood, friendship, and love. This relies heavily on the whole question I proposed prior of what purpose does the author and or the god who forces this person to transmigrate have in this universe. In this story, the author is like the perpetrator, the villain. They're the one who started the apocalypse and sent our character into this hell to relive over and over and over and over again. It is a really good book. It's about friendship and trust between all these girls. It's so cute, and I cannot wait until it becomes a TV show, and it better become a TV show. I wrote this script wanting to learn more about the reborn as a villainess trope, but then it slowly turned into me wanting to know more about the shoujo isekai at large. In the future, maybe I could cover the regression side of things, as I feel like they share a lot of similarities. The number of web novels out there where a tyrant dies, then regresses, becoming a good person, or a girl gets killed by her cheating husband, regressing in time to seek revenge, is just as prevalent as the reborn as a villainess trope. Women just love to read about badass, uppity women. Can you blame us? Guilty as charged. Lock me up for oogling. I like to think that the transmigration trope became popular due to the idea of flipping your typical fantasy romance story on its head. The cute pink hair OG heroine of the story with her negative I can't tilts is actually a male manipulator and not a girl's girl. That a normal human like you or like me, in just a few simple steps of dying and magically being reincarnated into a fictional world with a voluptuous body and tall model-like stature with long dark hair, could rise our way up to the top, transforming ourselves from a notorious reputation into a powerful and wise femme fatale with positive I can't tilt. Using the knowledge of what is to come and our deadly, witty personality, men who used to fall for the male manipulator's tricks instead fall head over heel in love with us as they should. Transmigration Stories tells reader that you are actually so badass and lovely, but sadly you were just born in the wrong dimension and in the wrong body, but you could have had it all if only. It's giving I was born in the wrong generation. The transmigration trope was emerged from isekai, sharing a long and complicated history. Though the reborn as a villainess transmigration trope arose in the more recent decades, having been birthed from a place of fanfic and YNification of your typical stories. The world has always loved revenge plots, with a strong character, strong arming a change. Being reborn as a villainess is a product of just that, wrapped up in this pretty, frilly package to appeal to a young female audience. A revenge plot, a powerful woman, some pretty men who would die for her, and you get yourself one of the most popular tropes in today's world. Who doesn't love a villainess?